Today's jam-packed show, but let's talk to you, Sakina.
We prepared to celebrate 30 years of freedom tomorrow. We're coming to you from Constitution Hill this morning, and it promises to be, a walk down memory lane, but also taking stock of where we've been, where we wanted to go, and how far we've come along that road. And I'm standing here in front of that flame of democracy, which is of course symbolic because this was lit on the 15th anniversary of the signing of our constitution as South Africa. And of course, this precinct, these buildings are rich with history. The old fort, number 4, we know that people were imprisoned here during the apartheid years. And of course, the women's jail, infamously, where people's dignity was also stripped in ways that today we can only look at and, be aghast. And then, of course, Leanne, you look at the people who've gone through these walls here at Constitution Hill, the likes of the people we always read about in our history books. And we'll talk more about some of those significant inmates here at these particular institutions at Constitution Hill. And later on, we have gathered a stellar cast, of course, of guests as we will reflect on this democracy. But you're going to have to stay with us because we're also launching a very exciting project, a program that's going to start here on SABC for the foreseeable future as we mark 30 years of democracy in South Africa. Democracy 30. And of course, we're going to introduce you to the person who is going to be hosting this particular project, and we'll tell you more about what's to come. So there's lots to talk about. There's going to be great excitement here, and we appeal to you to stay with us because you don't want to miss out. So we'll be back with you later, but for now, Leanne, let me hand it back to you.
All right, thanks very much, SK. Looking really forward to the broadcast. All right, but let's get on with our first news bulletin. Top story this morning, the Constitutional Court has granted the extension requested by former President Jacob Zuma and the MK Party in the IEC's appeal of the Electoral Court judgment. They are opposing the IEC's bid to appeal the Electoral Court order, which paved the way for Zuma to remain on the Umkhonto we Sizwe party's candidate list. The court has now given respondents until Tuesday to file. In the letter requesting an extension dated the 24th of April 2024, the MK Party and Zuma's lawyer stated that the time afforded to the respondents was unreasonably short. They added it would be impossible to furnish a meaningful answering affidavit within 24 hours. The original deadline set by the Constitutional Court was yesterday. Now, the Electoral Court is yet to provide reasons for its order, which set aside the IEC's March decision that disqualified Zuma's candidacy due to the contempt of court finding against him in the Apex Court. The IEC, which is standing by its March decision, filed papers in the Constitutional Court earlier this month asking for an urgent hearing. The alibi of Muzi Sibia, accused number 1 in the Senzo Meyiwa murder trial, has been dealt yet another blow. This as his bank records show that he was in Gauteng between 2013 and 2015. The state says it has obtained the accounts of accused 1, 2, 4 and 5. The version of accused number 1, Muzi Sibia, is that he was in Nongoma, KwaZulu-Natal between 2013, when he lost his job, and 2015, and could not have been in Gauteng nor involved in the killing of the soccer star on the 26th of October 2014. But a series of bank transactions read out in court show that Sibiya made withdrawals at ATMs in Vosloorus on Gauteng's East Rand. This is the second dash to Sibiya's alibi. In March, a witness who testified about data from the National Administration Traffic Information System showed that Sibiya sat for his learner's license test twice, in 2014 in Brakpan and in Boksburg. The three men accused of theft of foreign currency at President Cyril Ramaphosa's Phala farm are this morning expected to appear in the Bela Bela Magistrates Court in Limpopo. The three face charges of housebreaking, theft and conspiracy to steal. They allegedly stole $580,000 at the president's farm in February 2020. The NPA earlier told the court that 2 additional arrests were imminent. This as they had applied for the extradition of 2 Namibian nationals in connection with the case. 2 of the accused siblings, Floriana and Ndilinasho Joseph, have been released on bail. Floriana worked at the farm as a domestic worker at the time of the theft. Alleged mastermind Emanuela David has been denied bail. The matter is expected to be referred for trial soon. Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana says the many sectors that are functioning well are helping the country's economy to growth. He was reacting to the recent International Monetary Fund report, which ranks South Africa as the largest economy in Africa. Godongwana says South Africa has a strong and stable financial sector that can compete with the rest of the countries on the continent.
We're strong on the retail sector, we're strong on the telecom sector, where we are a mining jurisdictions which have developed competencies in those areas. So what we need is to look at the South African, where we've got the biggest financial sector and a stable financial sector on the continent. So what we need to be talking about, how do we strengthen those competencies in which South Africa can excel?
The mining is another important issue contributing to the economy. In terms of commodities, how are we doing? I mean, I'm looking at the challenge, the international factors, the Middle East, the war in Ukraine where oil has become expensive, but on the other hand you have gold and platinum prices being a safe haven. How do we leverage on that?
If you look at the spillover effects of China, is such that commodity exporting countries, should the kind of poor performances that the Chinese economy is likely to, should that materialize, it becomes a risk for all of us. That's one sort of problem for us. The second set of problem has been a domestic one in the performance of the logistics sector. So all of those things have got implications on how our commodity sector is likely to perform. Surely the strategy for South Africa cannot belong to one man. The question is, how do we as South Africans converge on a strategy to change the trajectory towards a growth one. We will contribute it in one small way via the fiscal side of things.
Right, that's it. That's where we'll leave your first news bulletin, and we'll bring you some headlines at 6:30. Right now, let's look at what's happening on the roads. Erin is standing by for that. Morning to you, Erin.
A very good morning to you, Leanne, and as always, a very good morning to the Morning Live viewers tuned in to the show. Before I begin, I just want to apologize if viewers at home happen to hear the wind in the background of my broadcast. Cape Town is wild this morning. Unfortunately, nothing I can do to stop the noise, so I trust that the viewers will show me some grace. On to traffic matters, just a reminder for motorists who make use of the route on the R21 in Pretoria to the airport that a full closure will be in effect again this weekend between Nalmapius and Olifantsfontein. The closure sees the road closed tomorrow from 6 a.m. until 6 p.m. and then Sunday's closure will be 6 a.m. until midday. So again, if you reside in the capital city and we're intending to use that R21 between Nalmapius and Olifantsfontein, you won't have access to that route and will be diverted via the M57. Speaking of closures, in Cape Town, the road between Morgenstad and Westport still remains closed in Mitchell's Plain on the M7 Jakes Hadwell. Day 3 of this closure, while just further on in Strandfontein, due to this heavy wind, Baden-Powell has sand on the roadway between Strandfontein and Coastal Park. Now, that road is very busy in the morning, so please drive slowly and, of course, just be vigilant out there. And in KwaZulu-Natal, if you're about to head out soon on the N3 East in the Ashburton area, note that there is a vehicle that is stationary at Linfield Park. I do believe it is blocking an essential travel lane to motorists, so please approach that one with extreme caution. Other than that, traffic is free-flowing on the country's roads with your normal peak time causing its usual delays, but nothing untoward. As I mentioned, the wind out here in Cape Town is no joke, so drive carefully on Cape Town roads today. And again, I do apologize if it has translated on air, but I'm sure Joel Guy will have all those details for you on the situation out here in the Mother City. Good morning to you, Joel.
Very good morning to you, Erin. Thanks for that update. Indeed, we have cloudy skies expected for the Cape provinces and also around KwaZulu-Natal, so no sunshine to talk about this morning for those areas. But for the rest of the country, as you wake up and you have those beautiful sunrise pictures, please send them to our WhatsApp number on the top of your screens and also share with us on our social media platforms, that is on X and also on Facebook. Now, here's how things are going to look like for the rest of your day. It is going to be mostly cloudy for the southern parts of the country and also in KwaZulu-Natal and parts of Mpumalanga, between a 30 and 60% chance of rain forecast from the southern parts of the Western Cape into the Eastern Cape and also into KwaZulu-Natal, where we should see scattered rain and thunderstorms for much of the province. The chance of rain decreases as we go into Mpumalanga, Limpopo and Gauteng, where we could see those showers late in the afternoon and also in the evening. Just a bit of cloud for the eastern areas of the Free State and much of the northwest. Otherwise, it will be fine for the Northern Cape and parts of central South Africa. Windy conditions expected along the coastal areas with strong winds forecast around the Cape Peninsula, around Cape Town as well, reaching 50 kilometers per hour, 40 kilometer per hour winds for the southern parts of the Western Cape and also along the south coast. Now, we have a warning for high fire danger conditions for parts of the Northern Cape. You still need to exercise a lot of caution where you see that shade of red. Gauteng is going to be nicely warm this afternoon. Temperatures mostly in the mid-20s with that small chance of thunder showers late in the afternoon and also in the evening. We could also see those showers pushing northwards into parts of Limpopo. It's going to be rather hot for places in the province, Mokopane and Lephalale picking at 30 degrees, 33 for Messina, 30 as well for the high in Palabora. Things get cooler as we go towards Mpumalanga. Temperatures mostly in the mid-20s. Rain and thunder showers forecast for the province. Skukuza warms to around 28 degrees. We're also expecting a cool one for much of the interior of KwaZulu-Natal, mostly cloudy with scattered rain and thunderstorms in most areas. Chilly for Kokstad, picking at just around 16, but much warmer for Durban and Richards Bay at 25 degrees. In the Eastern Cape, we are expecting highs in the upper teens and lower 20s. Rain and thunderstorms forecast for much of the province. It will be dry, however, for Maliswai, where a high of 22 is forecast. Dry for the northern and western parts of the Western Cape, but rain is forecast around the Garden Route and the Jason interior, where highs in the upper teens and lower 20s are expected. It will be sunny for the Northern Cape. The heat continues for Upington, peaking at 33, 30 for Kuruman. Then in the Free State, we are also expecting a dry one, mostly sunny for the western areas. Bloemfontein warming to around 28. In the northwest, we should see just a few specks of cloud overhead, hot for Tosca, Mahikeng 29, 28 for the high in Rustenburg. Now on Saturday, we're expecting isolated to scattered thunderstorms right across much of South Africa. Dry, however, for the west coast. Similar weather continues as we go into Sunday. That's all from the weather desk.
The world views South Africa as a miracle country. That's because despite tumultuous events that preceded the transitional period, the country managed to usher in a new era of constitutional democracy. Let's watch this insert just to remind ourselves as we look back at that difficult road that we have traversed.
From 1990 to 1994, the country had been teetering on the brink of war and peace. During this time, two crucial milestones dominated: negotiations to draft and secure our constitutional democracy, and a horrifying escalation of politically motivated violence aimed at destabilizing and even aborting democracy before it was even born. This era began on the 2nd of February 1990, when apartheid's last president F.W. de Klerk unbanned political parties, released political prisoners, and welcomed exiles home. The jewel in this crown of reforms was, of course, the release of Nelson Mandela on the 11th of February 1990. The death knell of apartheid had been sounded.
Mr. Nelson Mandela, a free man.
This would herald a peaceful transfer of power, or so we thought. After de Klerk's reforms, talks about talks culminated in the December 1991's launch of the Convention for a Democratic South Africa, CODESA, involving 20 different political parties. But these talks soon collapsed over major ideological differences, issues of majority rule and regional powers. However, in February 1992, the ANC succeeded in its demands for an interim government and the principles that a new South Africa be non-racial, non-sexist and democratic. CODESA talks resumed in May 1992 until the Boipatong massacre of June 1992.
The massacre has plunged the country into renewed political turmoil.
We pray, God, that this will be the last time we stand in front of our people and say to them, God cares.
But never was the prospect of peace so fraught than on the 10th of April 1993 with the assassination of SACP leader Chris Hani by the right-wing extremists, sparking riots and threats of further carnage.
Chris Hani une a rata batho ba rona le khotla la rona.
A week after Hani's assassination, the ANC and its allies demanded that a transitional executive committee be urgently installed. The ANC also insisted that the 27th of April 1994 be the date for South Africa's first non-racial elections. But on the 25th of June 1993, the fascist Afrikaner AWB stormed the World Trade Center, the site of the talks, as a symbol of the right-wing's threat of insurrection and civil war. Then in July 1993, an unlikely coalition of disgruntled Bantustan leaders and extreme right-wing groups exited the talks.
The IFP has called for a meeting of its Central Committee on Sunday, 28 June, Mr. Speaker, and you will decide how to deal with the ANC.
Coffins emerged from almost every home.
Between 1990 and 1994, an estimated 14,000 people had died. And there remained potentially radioactive issues in the process to peaceful negotiations.
Each and every coffin, a painful statement, if one were needed, that the price of political change in South Africa is being paid in blood.
And literally at the 11th hour, the IFP boarded the elections boat and the right wing formed the Freedom Front, which agreed to contest in the elections. And as we revisit where we came from, where we are and where we are going, we stand at a crucial juncture, reflecting on this journey of liberation and dealing with the healing, the hopes, the horror, the unfinished business, the violence and the inequality that continue to threaten our constitutional democracy.
And this is just a taste of what's to come here on SABC as we work our way through the 30 years of freedom that South Africa has had, but obviously not without its issues. But on that note, let's go to Constitutional Court now. That's where Sakina is. Find out what they've got in store for us and some of the guests they'll be chatting to, reflecting on this journey. Sakina, good morning to you once again.
Well, good morning, Leanne. Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to Constitution Hill once more as the sun rises over this very spiritual place. And, you know, earlier I was making reference to some of the historic events that have taken place here, some of the people who were imprisoned here, and I touched on the indignity that the people who were imprisoned here had to live through, and they would go through that with the full glare of people in buildings surrounding this place that could look on and see how they were being humiliated. So it is a rather fitting place to have the Constitution being housed and heralded here, and also making sure that we never go back to where we were. But of course, we told you earlier on about a very, very exciting project. And this is, of course, what we are unveiling. Part of the reason why we're here this morning. Democracy 30 on SABC. And here you have the man who is going to be the face of it. Oliver Dixon, good morning.
Morning, Sakina. Thank you so much for having me. This really is, you're right, a very deeply spiritual place. You can't be here and not feel the gravity of our history, the gravity of our freedom and democracy, and really take it all in.
And you know, last night I was thinking about the lead up to the 27th of April 1994. Trying to remember where I was, it wasn't a difficult task because it was just such an exciting time, but it was also a very volatile time in our country. And I remember going to a supermarket and the shelves were empty because people were stockpiling because they were not sure what was going to happen with
Really,
this
like
transition.
COVID. I asked that because I was a few months old. I'm as old as this country's democracy. So I think it's kind of serendipitous that I'm hosting a show reflecting on 30 years of democracy because it feels a lot like reflecting from my birth to now and all the highs and lows that have come with it.
Yeah.
And it truly is a time and a space that I think we need to slow down and ask a sobered question. Are we in a better off place today due to the freedoms, liberties and justice that we have today versus pre-1994? And I think part of the conversation, and as it unfolds, is reflecting honestly about the victories that we've had along the way, which many have happened in this chamber right in front of us, the Constitutional Court, which, by the way, is built with the same rocks and stones that was used to house and imprison political prisoners that fought for our freedom. So it's a really special project and a special place, and I'm so excited about doing this.
And the likes of Madiba, Nelson Mandela, Mahatma Gandhi, the likes of Fatima Meer, you had Albertina Sisulu, Winnie Madikizela Mandela, the Barbara Hogans of this world. They've all come through here, as well as infamous characters from our history like Daisy DeMelka, who killed two of her husbands and her son, was also imprisoned right here. So this is a place of great significance spiritually as well as historically. But of course, Democracy 30, Oliver. Tell us about it. So what can we look forward to?
So we're going to take stock between now and this show launches this morning, like that's what we're here to do in part. Our first in-studio and official episode will be this Sunday. It will air every Sunday at 8 p.m. On SABC News. And throughout the week on various SABC channels and media assets, you will be able to consume content and insert short mini-style documentaries about our democracy, taking stock about various points in our democracy. So I'll tell you what we'll do this Sunday. We're going to take a deep dive and reflection on the CODESA negotiations in the lead-up to our ultimate freedom and democracy, right? And at various other points, we're going to reflect on key institutions that played a part in that, such as the arts and the artists and the activists that played a role in crafting the messaging to the rest of the world about what was truly happening here. We're going to be speaking to some of those people. You're going to be speaking to one such person today, right? And that's an important conversation. We're going to be reflecting on the courts. We're going to be reflecting on the economy throughout the time. We're going to reflect on our role in the international community. But we're also going to ask really difficult questions as we explore the various themes that make up democracy. As we know, justice, restitution, inclusion, and things such as building the rainbow nation has been an incredibly difficult task. In fact, the concept of the rainbow nation, at least within my generation, is impugned. Many ask, was it a facade? Is it a real thing? Or did we just lie to each other? And then we're going to ask the question, have we fully done that work? And if not, what needs to be done going forward to really give meaning to democracy and freedom?
So essentially touching the past, the present, and hopefully looking at where we want to go as a nation.
Absolutely. And that means that a program like this needs the engagement and interactions of ordinary South Africans across the length and breadth of this country. Because, you know, normatively, when we speak about democracy, we're speaking about the impact it has in the lives of you and I and many other people, right? And so for me, this is ultimately about being able to have a conversation with my grandmother and my daughter at the same time, and look at the stories of what those lives have turned out as a result of the victories and the sacrifices of my grandmother, but also the hopefulness and the aspirations of my daughter. And so that is an interesting mix of people that we want to bring together. And so we implore South Africans to reach out to us, to be a part of our conversations and to engage us in the very difficult conversation that we're going to have.
And I must say, personally, I am looking forward to it. So this Sunday at 8 p.m. on SABC News, Democracy 30 is the program that we're launching. And how long is it going to run for, Oliver?
It's running from this Sunday all the way up until November. You know, fingers crossed, if it's a show that really resonates with South Africans, I'm sure our bosses will say, hey, let's keep this thing going, because the conversation about democracy, the conversation about freedom and justice is a never-ending conversation.
Well, Oliver Dixon, there you have it. Democracy 30. He is, of course, your host. We're going to take a quick break. Much more to come here. And Oliver was talking about some of our guests arriving. Judge Bernard Mwepe, he's arrived. Cheryl Carolus has arrived. And we'll tell you more about, excuse me, the others as well as they arrive. It's back to studio.
All right, welcome back, everybody. So let's just get you into a quick reminder of tonight. It is Friday night, so it's the Powerball jackpot at 16 million rand. That's what we're looking at today. So yeah, good luck to those of you that are playing. Perhaps that's your freedom. Who knows? Who knows? But yeah, it's interesting listening to the reflections of freedom here in South Africa and where we've come from and the journey that we've traversed as a nation, as a country. And, you know, all in amongst it, it's just been quite incredible to note how it's just been a tidal wave of emotions that many people have gone through, and we'll be hearing some of those stories. And as you heard, sort of dedicating time to talking to people and sharing their stories of what it's been like over these 30 years. I mean, some people calling it the miracle nation, the rainbow nation. Others are saying, where is that rainbow nation? Where is that miracle? However, you know, when you look back and you see where we've come from, it's very, very hard to not say that South Africa is a miracle for the times that have been through and where we are at the moment. So I think those are the kind of reflections we're going to be looking at today. We're asking you to do the same thing for us this morning. Write to us and let us know what democracy means for you. Let's put up that question, in fact, and see how we're asking you this. And it's really your view on 30 years of South Africa's democracy. You know, what was it like? How has it been for you? When you look back over these years, when you look back to how it was and how it is now, I know many will still complain that many of the promises that were made are still not being delivered. However, some will say, my life has completely changed and it's really been amazing. So we're looking forward to listening to and hearing your views. So you can send us that message on X at Morning Live SABC. Also, send us a WhatsApp, 078-459-1897. So today, special broadcast, that's what we're focusing in on. And we're so looking forward to you being with us. Also, look at that new website that we've got there, mydemocracy@sabcnews.com. Visit that as well. And no doubt you'll be finding a lot of information about South Africa's 30 years of democracy. Right, on that note, let's quickly take a break here on the program. We'll return back to Constitution Hill. Right, welcome back. As indicated, today is a special launch of the SABC News' project to commemorate 30 years of South Africa's democracy. The SABC was there to document the unfolding events over the past 3 decades as we laughed, cried, and sometimes were left aghast. Well, Sakina and Oliver are standing by with their guest, but let's first get to Oliver and see who he's going to be chatting to at this point. Oliver, good morning to you.
Good morning. Thank you so much. We're still coming to you live from the Constitutional Hill out in Braamfontein. Of course, this place, which really is the mecca of justice and freedom in South Africa. As you can see right behind me, the flame of democracy and justice still aflame and reminding us of what we have fought for and what we have to preserve. But speaking of preservation, I want to introduce you to Nolubabalo Memese, who is heading up democracy's education, literacy, justice and constitutional literacy, as well as heritage here at the Constitutional Hill. Nolubabalo, good morning. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. I've taken a tour through this place many times before, and every time feels brand new. And I've always wondered why that's the case. But you're the reason why that's the case. Tell us how you put together an educational program, but also how you put and curate and the work the team does to put together the type of content here and the type of experiences here that really rings home for us what was at stake, what was fought for, and what we have to fight to preserve.
Thank you, Oliver. Good morning. Constitution Hill, when we come to work every day, I'm sure it shows. We come to a place that we are passionate about, right? So when we get to work, we don't feel like we're at work. So the team has different aspects to it. There's the heritage part of it, which is the preservation of the site. Then there's people who literally curate temporary exhibitions. That's part of the Creative Hub. There's a team who focuses on the permanent exhibitions. There's a team who is in tourism who runs tours every day from 9 to 5, Monday to Sunday. There's a programming team, which is a team that focuses on the educational aspects of it, that does outreaches. So it's a mixed bag of different people who are passionate about what the site stands for and about constitutionalism.
Tell us about some of the outreach, because you guys find yourself in all parts of the country, places like rural Eastern Cape, remote parts of KZN, Limpopo, Mpumalanga. Talk us through about some of those outreach programs and what it entails.
Okay, so we feel very strongly about the fact that the people who are in Gauteng can interact with the space. Like you say, it's a feeling, right? So there are people who are able to interact, to touch, to see, to feel, to hear. But there are people who never have the opportunity to come here. And we're not talking about people who are affluent, who can afford to book and come and say, I've come on a tour. So we like to actually go on a little combi and go out to those communities. And sometimes we'll package a high school program and we're thinking we're going to pitch it at the high school level. It's just for constitutional literacy in high school. And then the whole community comes. The parents come, the grannies come. And so those trips to us always, we come back feeling actually refreshed and more passionate than when we left.
I received my first copy of the Constitution, the little booklet. I still have it. Around 2009 about. It was during a debating competition run by the Constitutional Hill Institution, which, by the way, was the inaugural one, which my school won, and I was part of that team. And I'm very proud of that booklet that I have. I got actually 2 copies, one in English and one in Setswana that I gave to a friend of mine. Do you guys still do that? Do you still do the constitutional literacy and have the Constitution available to everybody in any language that they want to access it in, and talk through what this document actually is and how people should receive it?
So this is now going to reveal my age, but when I was growing up, on my mom's nightstand, she would have her Bible, her prayer books, and a copy of the Constitution, right? Constitution booklets were at post offices, they were at public institutions, and anyone could get a copy of it. Not so much today. So we actually sometimes rely on private funding to print those booklets, those tiny booklets you speak of. We have a stash that we got printed through private donors, and the beauty of it is I like the fact that it can go into little blazers. Yeah. I've seen kids take it and put it in the blazer, and we did a workshop with the LGBTIQ community, 30 members of the LGBTIQ community, and I said to them, how many of you have held this book in your hand? 2 hands went up. This is a marginalized community that needs to actually have their rights heard, felt, protected. And 2 people out of 30 had held the book in their hand. So we are passionate about having this drive. I spoke to a school, group of educators, 40 in the staff room, and 3 hands went up when I asked how many of you have actually touched it. So what you're saying is something that's very close to my heart, that we need to get these out there because you can't protect and enforce what you don't know. So we still have those drives, and it's still something that we think is very important.
Nolo Babalo, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your work, your sacrifice, and what you guys do here. It truly is an important part of our national program of unity and inclusion and transformation. Thank you so much for that. Really appreciate it. Look, the conversation doesn't end here. We do continue on the other side of this. Sakina and I will be in conversation with the head of news here at SABC, and we're going to be talking about why this program Democracy 30, which I'll be hosting, exists, but also the role that the SABC has played in South Africa's democracy over the last 30 years, and the role it will continue to play as we commemorate 30 years of democracy. Don't go away. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Welcome back. So our democracy may be 30 years old, but there are people who've lived in South Africa, in apartheid South Africa, and they have very interesting views about the different dispensations they have experienced. So if you're as keen as I am, let's take a listen to what they've had to say.
I have a right to vote for the party that I like. I have a right for the resources that I need in this country.
Democracy has lost its meaning. Democracy is supposed to represent love and equality that South Africans share amongst each other. Now that doesn't exist anymore.
To me, democracy means like how the country has developed from 1994 to 2024. How the people has the freedom to vote, because during the apartheid, only certain races could vote.
To me, democracy means freedom of expression. You know?
What democracy means to me is just being together. Being able to just walk the streets and not have to worry about color, about race, about sex. Just know that I can make friends with the next person I see. I can make friends and talk to whoever crosses the road next to me, and I know that it's not going to end badly for me.
Democracy means to me equal pay, equal opportunities, and having everyone within the country be treated with respect and dignity to ensure a good future for the country.
Democracy, it means to me I have a right for education, health, housing, water and sanitation.
We thought it meant something after 30 years. There's still poor people, they got nothing. We got something, a few of us got a chance. There's a few of us that just got through. We slipped through. After 50 years, I'm 50 years old now, only I can say I can put something away. Now what about a 30-year-old?
There are a lot of good things that have been done, particularly someone who's my age, who have been around throughout the apartheid regime.
When we went to vote for the first time, we were so happy, very happy. We just thought other countries that are now independent, we are also going to be independent.
We didn't know what democracy is holding for us, like now. There's more poverty than ever before.
Looking back versus nowadays, everything has changed, especially for us as the natives, black people.
Democracy means the people shall govern. It's a government by the people, for the people.
Yes, got democracy, but I'm still poor.
Some real stories coming there from average, normal South Africans and how they feel about 30 years of democracy and how it's impacted them or how it has not impacted them at all. Well, as indicated, today is a special launch of the SABC News' project to commemorate 30 years of South Africa's democracy. The SABC was there to document the unfolding events over the past 3 decades as we laughed, we cried, and sometimes we were even left aghast. Well, SABC being at the center of it all, news covering it, the footage is there, and let's go over back to Constitution Hill. Sakina is standing by with our SABC News Group executive. Sakina, over to you.
Well, thanks, Leanne, and indeed, welcome back here to Constitution Hill. And just listening to those voices, reflecting on 30 years of democracy, and it's such an interesting time to be taking that particular stance because we are, as a country, at a crossroads. Some would say perhaps at the precipice, but of what? And how far have we come? And as you said, I'm joined by the Group Executive for News here at the SABC, Moshweshwe Monare. Thanks so much for waking up, coming through here to be with us on what is a very auspicious occasion.
Thanks very much. Look, the occasion it's really critical. It's very important, especially given where we're coming from. As a country, celebrate 30 years of democracy. As the SABC, we've been part of that 30 years, especially SABC News, reflecting the emotions, that was going on around 1994 and the people's aspirations, fears. And we decided as SABC News to say it's really important for us to reflect that away from the noise of political campaigning, just to reflect on South Africans looking back to say what does it mean to them 30 years ago.
And of course, it's so important, as you say, just to look at how far the SABC has carried this democracy, because we were there to document every step of it before and all the way through.
Yeah.
You know, you think of the Codesa years. When you think of those SABC News archives, man, you could get lost in there.
Yeah, no, that's important. But also just to say, after 1994, SABC became a real public broadcaster, especially SABC News, to reflect the plurality of voices, diversity of voices, and not necessarily being a state broadcaster. And from that 30 years, it has told people to reflect the the pulse of the nation, and that's what we'll continue doing for the next 30 years. Even if you see our archive, we have documented, we were part of that history. And even as we go into the elections and beyond, we want to be part of that history, to reflect, to give people information, all sides of the stories, all dimensions, do it independently and impartially, to continue to be a trusted news broadcaster in the country and beyond.
And of course, speaking of trust, the SABC is trusted, and very highly so. I mean, in one of the metrics that came out towards the end of last year, SABC actually came up tops of all the entities that deal with government or are in some way government aligned, even ahead of SARS and the IEC
and Parliament as
and
well.
Parliament. So that's no small feat.
You know, that's very much important. That's very important, especially given what democracy and what public broadcasting is all about. If you cannot have a public broadcaster that is trusted by millions, then you're going to have a problem. And we need to remember the reason why we are trusted is because of the credibility of our content, the fact that whatever decisions and that we make as SABC News are based on an independent, impartial point of view. And also to say millions of South Africans depend on SABC as the source of the news, and therefore we cannot fail them. That is why it's important that as SABC News we launch this Democracy at 30 to reflect, and also to say to people of South Africa, millions of South Africans, to say we have been with you for the last 30 years and will continue doing so.
And it's such an important project, especially at this moment where it's not just 30 years of democracy that we are celebrating and reflecting on, but it's also a time when many people believe this will be the most pivotal election in our country. But you have that on the one side, and then you've got Democracy 30. And again, looking at Democracy 30, what is that meant to do for South Africa?
Look, it's important to also distinguish that. As you know, that elections, it's about giving voices and platform to political parties campaigning. So away from that noise, away from that where political parties are competing with each other, we want to say, as a nation, as South Africa, there is something worth celebrating, and that is the democratic miracle of 1994. And we are saying that outside the political parties, outside the political campaigns, and away from political noises, we want ordinary South Africans to reflect on what does this mean. I mean, 1994, as you may remember, there were long queues. There were people who had millions, and the majority of South Africans who have to vote for the first time. And just to reflect, to say, what does this mean to you? I mean, the majority of South Africans actually did not have any of their fundamental rights been recognized by the Constitution. And they were recognized for the first time when there was a Bill of Rights. And to us, it's just reflection, just to celebrate, to pay tribute to 1994, to pay tribute to what happened in the country in 1994. That is why I'm saying that it has to run parallel, just to run away from the noises of political campaigns.
Well, Moshoeshoe Munare, thanks so much for speaking to us this morning. Again, very, very auspicious moment, and in a place we couldn't have asked for a better place. I mean, I'm looking just over Moshoeshoe's shoulder, and there you have the legislature for the city of Johannesburg. That's where they sit, overlooking, of course, this place of significant historical moments. And we are going to be talking to some of the people who've been there, tracked these 30 years with us, and we're going to find out what's your democracy as well, because that's the question we are reflecting on. So Oliver Dixon, you saw him earlier, Democracy 30, launching this Sunday at 8 p.m. on SABC News. It's 7 o'clock right now. I'm going to hand you back to Leanne, but of course, don't forget to engage us on our question of the day, and do stay tuned. You really don't want to miss out on the panel discussion that's coming up. It's back to you, Leanne.
Thanks very much, Sakina. All right, let's bring you those top stories we're following in the news. The 3 men accused of theft of foreign currency at President Cyril Ramaphosa's Phala Phala farm are this morning expected to appear in the Bela Bela Magistrates Court in Limpopo. The 3 face charges of housebreaking, theft and conspiracy to steal. They allegedly stole $580,000 at the president's farm in February 2020. The NPA earlier told the court that 2 additional arrests were imminent. This as they had applied for the extradition of 2 Namibian nationals in connection with the case. 2 of the accused, siblings Floriana and Ndilinasho Joseph, have been released on bail. Floriana worked at the farm as a domestic worker at the time of the theft. Alleged mastermind Emanuela David has been denied bail. The matter is expected to be referred for trial soon. The alibi of Muzi Sibia, accused number 1 in the Senzo Meyiwa murder trial, has been dealt another blow. This as his bank records show that he was in Gauteng between 2013 and 2015. The state says it has obtained the accounts of accused 1, 2, 4 and 5. The version of accused number 1, Muzi Sibia, is that he was in Nongoma, KwaZulu-Natal between 2013, when he lost his job, and 2015, and could not have been in Gauteng, nor involved in the killing of the soccer star on the 26th of October 2014. But a series of bank transactions read out in court show that Sibia made withdrawals at ATMs in Vosloorus on Gauteng's East Rand. This is the second dash to Sibia's alibi. In March, a witness who testified about data from the National Administration Traffic Information System showed that Sibia sat for his learner's license test twice in 2014 in Brakpan and in Boksburg. The bail hearing for 6 men accused of killing Kaizer Chiefs soccer player Luke Fleurs has been postponed to next Thursday, the 2nd of May, at the Roodepoort Magistrates Court. The state has asked the court for more time to verify some of the information contained in the accused statements. In their application for bail, the 6 men said that the state cannot prove that they are responsible for murdering Fleurs and robbing him of his vehicle. Fleurs was shot and killed during a hijacking incident in Honeydew earlier this month. The 6 men from Sloverville in Soweto stand accused of murder, aggravated robbery, as well as defeating the ends of justice. Fleurs was laid to rest in his home town of Mitchell's Plain in Cape Town last Saturday. Minister of Finance Enoch Godongwana says South Africa has debt issues, and that's no different from what most other countries are experiencing. He says as long as the country's economy keeps growing, debt should not be an overwhelming concern for citizens and investors. Godongwana was discussing this with SABC News international editor Sophie Mokoena.
How do we pay the loans?
Let me make this point. There's no country in the world. In fact, the same report of the IMF says although the USA economy is performing well, fiscally it's probably not going to be sustainable, right? It's high levels of debt and so on. So South Africa is no exception in this regard. Every country has got to deal with debt issues. The problem, I've always emphasized this point, is not the size of the debt, it's the capacity of the economy to service that debt. What does that mean? It means the economy has got to grow. If the economy is not growing, then debt becomes a problem. But if the economy is growing, debt is not a problem.
People living with disabilities in the country have called on government to strengthen and implement policies that will secure inclusivity and equal access to transportation services. Yesterday, President Cyril Ramaphosa delivered his keynote address at the Transport Summit on Universal Accessibility with the theme, Accessible Transport for All. South Africa is a signatory to the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities.
Several key stakeholders, including representatives from the Department of Transport, people living with disabilities, taxi associations, and representatives of transport SOEs, amongst others, gathered under one roof to deliberate, identify challenges, and find solutions to universal access to all types of transportation, including aviation, maritime, road, rail, and public transport. Those living with disabilities have said summits like this must not be a talk shop.
At the moment, there is compliance. However, we have to report that it is slow, and we are trying our level best to now motivate and advocate to be more inclusive and ensure that we have accessibility across the board in all areas.
What I would really like to come out of this is some sort of mechanism that will enforce the current legislation. And for example, I mean, public transport, like the minibus taxis, the drivers, there are very few drivers that have compassion for persons with disabilities.
Government says it will continue to respond to the challenges people with disabilities face. To date, the revised white paper on the National Transport Policy, which was published 3 years ago, commits to a number of implementation strategies. The Presidential Working Group has also been working towards coordinating initiatives to integrate different modes of transport for the disabled.
The Department of Transport has gazetted a national policy for parking discs that will enable drivers with disabilities to use them in one part of the country and everywhere in South Africa. That, I think, will be very good.
Meanwhile, an example of what is possible is evident at Gautrain, along with their plans to improve accessibility.
The next level that we're looking at going into is what we call mobility on demand. It's the ability for somebody who is living with disability to be able to request a specific service, and that service will come and pick them up from their house with a trained driver who will know how to handle any form of situation. Somebody walking with crutches, somebody on a wheelchair, the different types of challenges, somebody who's blind. And that in itself is the next level of service that we are introducing into the system as a whole. It will form part of what we call the How Express.
Natasha Piri, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Right, that's it. That's where we'll leave your news at 7. We'll perhaps bring you some headlines at 7:30, depending on how this discussion goes at Constitution Hill with Sakina, but definitely another news at 8 o'clock. All right, let's check in on the roads, and Erin is standing by. Erin, over to you.
Thank you so much, Leanne. A very good morning to all the Morning Live viewers if you've just tuned in. We start in Gauteng once more, where traffic southbound before Rigel Avenue on the N1 is stacked. A vehicle is stationary up ahead, and that's what's essentially causing the jam. Motorists are reporting lengthy delays as everyone tries to figure out which way to go. But note that traffic is moving, it's just slow. Meanwhile, traffic on the N3 North between the Haldenes interchange and the Elands interchange is also heavily congested, however, is moving. You are advised to make provision for extra travel time here, though, as traffic volumes are high. To KZN, if you're a commuter that makes use of the M7 in Pinetown to get to the N3 highway, note that traffic is queuing quite heavily there. Delays reported are around 15 minutes if you're joining the back of the queue. In a rush, try to use another route to get to that N3 highway. Otherwise, you're going to have to factor that delay time into your commute this morning. And down in the Western Cape, where currently this is what Cape Town looks like, rather busy indeed. Multiple routes from AZ Berman Drive to Settlers Way to Hayterveld, as well as the N2 between Settlers and Mowbray Main are all busy. The N1 coming from Brackenfell past Century City also very busy. So is Marine Drive into town coming from Tableview. Early on, I mentioned sand on the roadway on Baden-Powell in Strandfontein, and that as a result is causing congestion there. Here we can see that traffic queuing on that N2 inbound at Jake's Tadeville Drive, been queuing for about 30 minutes now, so delays are to be expected there. Roads are definitely busy, and it is the weekend, so I'm sure everyone wants to get in quickly and get out even quicker. So just be vigilant, remember to wear your seatbelt, and of course, just make sure that you drive well on the roads today. I'm going to leave it at that. Joel Guy is standing by with a weather update for you.
Welcome back. We have a wet start to the day across the Eastern Cape as well as parts of KwaZulu-Natal, and we have some pictures to testify to that. Cloudy skies in East London sent in this picture sent in by Natalie. It is already raining around the coastal city, and we also have a mostly cloudy start to the day further north. This is in Hluleka in the Transkei, sent in by Trevor. The sun's still quite able to shine through those clouds, but it is going to get increasingly cloudy for this part of the Eastern Cape. Still in the Eastern Cape, this is around the Wild Coast, also quite a lot of cloud over those parts. Then here in Gauteng, this is from Pretoria, sent in by Charmaine, also showing quite a lot of cloud overhead. It is going to be partly cloudy around Gauteng, with showers expected later on this afternoon. Just a 30% chance of that for the province and also for parts of Limpopo and Mpumalanga. But down here in KwaZulu-Natal and the Eastern Cape, we will be seeing up to 60% chance of rain and thunderstorms, thanks to this cold front that is now leaving our shores. And further west, just isolated rain showers around parts of the Western Cape. It is going to be windy over the southwestern areas, including around Cape Town, where the winds will reach speeds of about 50 kilometers per hour. Breezy as well for much of the east coast, especially between East London and the Durban area. It will be mostly fine for the Northern Cape. Lots of sunshine, allowing for warm to hot temperatures that could lead to runaway fires, where you see that shade of red for the central areas and the northernmost parts. Now, Gauteng is going to be pleasantly warm this afternoon. Partly cloudy skies expected. It will be dry for much of the day, but later on towards the early evening hours, we could see some thunder showers. Johannesburg and Springs, as well as Bronkhorstspruit, all warming to around 25 degrees. Temperatures in the lower 30s for most parts of the Limpopo province. Thunder showers forecast in places. Polokwane picking at around 27 degrees. Thundery showers also forecast across Mpumalanga. Temperatures here mostly in the mid-20s, but rather cool for Mkondo, making it to just around 23 degrees. It is also going to be cool for the interior of KwaZulu-Natal, cold even around Kokstad, with a high of just 16 degrees, and we're expecting scattered rain and thunderstorms across the province. Wet weather is also forecast for the coastal areas, in that just in interior in the Eastern Cape and much of the province will be seeing maximum temperatures in the upper teens and lower 20s. Similar weather for the southern parts of the Western Cape. Cape Town is going to get away with partly cloudy skies, warming to around 23 degrees. A sunny one is forecast for the Northern Cape. It will be hot for the northeastern sections. Kimberley warms to around 29, the same for Springbok. Then in the Free State, we are expecting dry weather as well. Temperatures staying in the upper 20s and lower 30s. It will be dry for the northwest. Partly cloudy skies right across the province. Rustenburg picking at around 28 degrees. Now on Saturday, we are going to see increasingly unsettled weather right across much of the country. It will stay dry, however, for the western areas, and the same kind of weather continues into Sunday, with dry conditions persisting over the west. That's all from me for now.
Right, welcome back. So, of course, today dedicated to 30 years of freedom here in South Africa. And we asked you a question this morning all about your views on 30 years of democracy in South Africa. And let's read a couple of those as we continue. So, first up from our X account, Siyabulela saying, greetings to you and your viewers at home. We've really come a long way. I had glimpses of the previous era and I'm grateful for our blood-earned democracy. It is unfortunate that the liberator is currently becoming the oppressor. We can change that, though, come May 29th. Aluta. Pule Tubela, and saying water is a source of life. After 30 years of democracy, there's still communities who are suffering with water. Collins, nothing to write home about. In these 30 years that we expected a society in which there would be equal rights and opportunities, we witnessed greedy hyenas masquerading as politicians, taking over and mercilessly plundering and stealing from the underprivileged. This is again Siyabulela saying, morning to the viewers and ladies. We've come from a very, very far, but there's a lot to be achieved. The pain is losing our democratic gains through trusting unscrupulous people with leading us. They've destroyed a lot of aspects to further grow. 29th of May must come. Sekhwati Abshani, good morning to Bella Mamanas. Thank you so much. We are, and of course Sakina, we are happy for democracy, but political parties make it difficult for us to practice our freedom. Have yourselves a great Friday and weekend ahead. Khaboniwe saying, good morning family. Freedom Day is significant to our past, present and future. We've come a very long way and our constitution is one of the most progressive in the world. Even so, our government and authority have failed us endless times. It is a shame. Klo, free houses, water and electricity. A lot has been done and more is yet to be done. Collins, nothing to celebrate or commemorate here. Democracy poignantly turned out to be just a fallacy as greedy politicians turned the state into a looting spree. Tell me about democracy when the railways, SOEs have collapsed, unemployment and 4,700 post office workers retrenched. Shabaranks, morning. I still feel the excitement and determination of 1994. Things were going exceptionally well until the liberator becomes the oppressor. Bonasani, for me, it showed a downfall of many things, from infrastructure not taken care of and service delivery downgraded year after year. In 1994, I was 11 years old and I saw a lot of things then, but when I look back now, I see nothing but corruption. Pule saying, my view is simple. In a nutshell, corruption, hunger, no jobs, no service delivery. The rand is dying a slow death. Food prices are at the highest in 30 years of poverty and pain, not forgetting Eskom. Not a very promising batch of comments there, I must say. Quite hard to read them, and I'm sure quite hard for you as a viewer to listen to as well. But remember, those are coming from viewers, from South Africans who are expressing their views of living in South Africa at this time and what it's like for them. Please keep them coming. We certainly will read as many as we can. But as we've said and promised you, Sakina is with some of those individuals now who have played a critical role in South Africa's democratic journey. And let's see what this discussion is going to be about. That'll happen straight after this break. Stay with us.
And welcome back. And we, of course, have moved location, but still at Constitution Hill. And we've arrived at that moment that I've asked you not to miss this morning, because we have gathered for you a stellar cast of guests this morning, people who were there. They have seen it. They are with us, seeing the reality of modern-day South Africa. And, of course, it speaks to our question this morning that we're asking you about. Talk to us about your democracy. This, of course, on the eve of South Africa celebrating 30 years of democracy. 27th of April, 1994. Where were you? You know, what are your memories of that day, or indeed the day before, like today? And let me just introduce our cast this morning. And I say our cast because, yeah, if they were actors, they would be right up there, vying for the honors in this particular movie that they would play in. So to my right, I have Dr. Tian Skieloff, and he was the head of administration of the multi-party negotiations process. And then to his right, we have Judge Bernard Ngwepe, who's a retired judge president. Ms. Cheryl Carolus is a veteran activist in this country, and of course continues to work in the field of activism in South Africa. And we have to her right Mr. Jackie Soroke, who is a leader of the Pan-Africanist Congress of Azania, and he was also one of the CODESA negotiators for the PAC. So there you have it. Dr. Skieloff, let me start with you. And I want to go back slightly further than 1994 to the delegation that went to Dakar in Senegal to meet with the ANC. So how did you come to be a part of that? And what was the objective of that particular moment as you were part of that, roped in by the late Dr. Frederick van Zyl Slabbert at the time? So talk to us about that.
Well, many things in my life happened either by chance or providence, so you can choose which one. I was at a function, and a friend of mine was asked by Van Zyl that the Africans and the Afrikaners must talk. This was '86. And I then said, it sounds to me like a good idea. And the aim basically was, remember, the ANC itself wasn't sure that they should meet these Afrikaners. And government obviously didn't want us to meet with the ANC. But eventually we did meet in a 3-day conference in Dakar. And I think it was groundbreaking in the sense that it wasn't the first meeting between internal South Africans and the ANC, but it was the first time that a group of mostly Afrikaners met with them. And obviously people back home cried foul and lots of trouble and so on. But it was to break the ground, I think. And I remember saying, okay, these guys don't have horns, so perhaps we can talk to each other. And obviously Thabo Mbeki was the leader of that delegation, many others. And in that sense, that changed my life. I wouldn't be sitting here if I hadn't gone to Dakar. And I think it was the first time that South Africans looked each other in the eye and said, let's go forward to a common future.
But when your delegation came together, I'm curious to know, what were the conversations? What were you hoping to achieve beyond the meeting and breaking, the barriers? Surely you went in there with some agenda items to say, this is what we want, this is what we hope to come out with.
The conference was structured that the South African or the internal group gave a paper and the others gave a paper, and we had discussions. So obviously we wanted to talk about democracy and hear about what the ANC feels about that. We differed a lot about the economic system at that stage, even later on. I think on democracy we sort of could find ourselves or each other. On economics we were very far apart. But eventually it was understanding each other, and I think they also thought, okay, these Afrikaners are not all that difficult, perhaps we can talk to each other.
Cheryl Carolus, as someone who was here, and all of these developments are now suddenly unfolding after much strife in the country, what were your thoughts when you heard of this delegation making its way to Dakar, Senegal, to meet with the ANC?
We were deeply suspicious, and I think what we don't realize is what a state our country was in at the time of 1986. We were a nation at war with itself. There were young white men who were forcibly conscripted into the defense force, who were in our streets. The enemy, as perceived by the then government, was the people of this country. The majority of the people, black, over 80% of the population, were now the enemy. And so the defense force was actually inside on every street in the townships of South Africa. We were really a deeply divided nation, but we were also a country that was alight. The place was burning. And to even contemplate that you sit down and talk with the enemy was just a stretch too far. But I think something else which Tian says with the benefit of hindsight. We are all, 40 years older now from the 1980s, the time of that talk, almost 40 years older. You also realize that why it was so important to start those journeys was because there was an intractable situation in our country. When you think of what constitutes power in any country, there were aspects that we as the liberation movement, that myself, Jackie and others were part of, that we had, that the National Party government could never wrest to themselves. There were aspects of power that they had that we could never achieve. They had military might, they had significant control of the economy, but they also knew we could call a strike like that, and the people of this country would stay away. We played a vital role we had significant power through mass mobilization and organization on the ground. And the point where we all realized that we could either take this country down a route where we would destroy ourselves and everything, because there was no ways that the balance of power could shift. It was not a chance. I mean, Comrade Jackie and I both were in underground structures of the ANC, PAC, and our armed wings was never going to win military power over the National Party Defense Force. So something had to give. But I think I won't speak for Comrade Jackie, and it'd be interesting
and
to
I
ask
want to
him.
hear from him, from the PAC perspective, when this moment happened.
Yes, I think the nature of the struggle for South Africa, which is very complex and still is, was even then, because you see, we are not like other parts of Africa where you don't have, you had the mother country, the colonial powerhouse, being in Britain and elsewhere. Here, we had communities, generations of people who live in the area and who have interacted with each other, but still have conflict in the way in which power is shared or power is looked at. The PAC knew very well that we could never really reach a Scotch-led policy to destroy everyone, and that at some stage we would be, like politics does, we'll be forced to sit at a table and negotiate a shared future with all the citizens of the country. That we understood. But obviously pushing for a status where the oppressed had a more powerful voice than the oppressed. That political moral high ground was very important for us to achieve. And I think to a great extent, the settler regime of the time was forced to go to the table as well, because the groundswell of support from the masses on the ground was too much. There was also the aspect of the international community. At the time, in the late 80s, the US in particular was sure that it was going to have a monopoly over power. It was going to be a unipolar world directed. You know, they were talking of a new world order that they were directing, and they had interest in Southern Africa as a whole. However, the dominoes were falling. In Angola, the power of the US was being limited. The SADF was also losing some wars in Angola. Namibia had to be free because there was an international position, resolution 435, I don't quite remember what it was, but it meant Namibia should go on. So the last remaining outpost of colonialism was South Africa. And resolving the issues of South Africa had also the implication of force from the international community. There was a Harare Declaration. We were in prison, and one of the conditions for these discussions was that political prisoners must be released. In the PAC, with our principle of non-collaboration, forced us not to entertain any agreement on indemnities and so forth. So we were released, and I'm also one of those, without signing anything. And our policy was that we don't need to appease anyone. We have to squarely go to the issues that confront us and put pressure, despite the reforms and the changes that were taking place, put pressure up to the ultimate end so that when we go to the table to negotiate, we negotiate from a position of strength. That's the approach we took.
Judge Ngwefe, at this point, what are your perspectives on the developments? Because you are already a lawyer at this point, and there's a lot of activity going on in the country, a lot of people being imprisoned, wrongly so, for standing up for their rights, or trying to at this point. And all of these negotiations are happening. What's your perspective at that point?
Well, I must say, the process that was described by TNS earlier on, the meeting of the ANC and others and so forth, and the subsequent developments that followed, I must, quite frankly, I think to some of us, things developed pretty quickly, especially after, even towards the release of Mr. Mandela. I think things moved a bit quite fast, and even thereafter. Now, there I was. When we came here this morning, I jokingly said to Jackie that I told her that I told Ms. Carolus that I'm the person who sent Jackie to prison. This is because I was the advocate defending him when he was tried for his political activities and was sent to prison. I was his advocate, and incidentally, here I am with him now. Now, that was the role that was played by some of us at that time. We could see that things were developing. We could, and of course, all along, people were being arrested left, right, and center, and detained, and the like, and so forth, and so on. As the lawyers would run around trying to do the best that we could, which was against a very difficult situation. And there was a time, I was just saying that there was a time when we were saying to ourselves as defending lawyers that we go there not to anticipate an acquittal, because during that time, nobody was ever to be acquitted. He wasn't acquitted as well. That's why I say I sent him to jail. Why I say I sent him to jail is because I knew, and probably inside himself knew, as many others, I knew that the odds were stacked against us, and he'll probably be found guilty. Why? Because you were defending a client who would never stand there in court and deny his political inclinations or deny that he was a freedom fighter. The principle was that they would stand there proudly in court and admit, in the sense of not denying the role they were playing towards liberating the nation. And you go there as a lawyer to go and defend them, knowing very well what to come out. And that is where we were. And I was thereafter, where I met Elof and others, I was one of the 8-member team of lawyers who were appointed by the negotiating forum. All the parties agreed that the 8 of us, we would be the lawyers who would come and help draft the new constitution. And I was amazed by the way people were apart, but also at the same time, how sometimes they could come together. And I could detect that by far the majority of the people were of course, willing to compromise here and there, but at the same time, you would realize that the division was there, and that division was going to remain for a long time to come. And as the 8-person team of technicians to draft the constitution. We'll do it bit by bit and present it over to the negotiation forum. And then they'll approve Article 1 and 2 and 3 and criticize it. We'll go back and we put in the corrections, then draft Section 1 from 6, 7, 8, they give it to them, they debate. We're supposed to spend, so I think we're told that we'll finish within a month, but we spent 8 months there, precisely because the process was difficult and people were in many respects apart as they were in some respects together. It was a very uncertain period in the sense that one could never tell what the ultimate outcome would be, bearing in mind that we all knew what was at stake.
Can I just add to that? Judge speaks about 8 months, but if you look at the time when the second phase started, it was almost to the day 9 months until the interim constitution was born. So I always think that's a nice symbolic one. And the other thing is that in the first CODESA, people often don't know that CODESA was in 1992. Actually, December 91 till June 92. And that one flopped. We went our own ways. And many reasons were there. But one of the reasons was that we didn't have technical people. The politicians, all of them, wanted to do it themselves. And they sat in groups of 80 in public with the media, and they negotiated. There was not a chance that we could reach it. And when the technical people came in, we started making progress. So it's lessons learned.
All right. We just quickly have to take a break, but we're going to come back because I want to pick up on that point because CODESA 1, CODESA 2, as you said, I was actually reading through some of the transcripts yesterday and the day before, and it's just so fascinating reading some of the submissions that were made by the former Bantustan leaders, and how they tried to defend their position and the like. So we're going to come back and talk CODESA 1 and 2. And of course, I'll ask Jackie as well whether he has forgiven Judge Mwepe for what happened there. But let's take a quick break and then we'll come back and continue this discussion. And welcome back. And of course, just going down memory lane, reminiscing, and also just for some of us, a moment of education, because I think we haven't told the story of how we got to this point as South Africa, as well as perhaps we could and should be telling it. There's so much that we have forgotten about, and there's so much that we never knew, that we think we know, but we actually don't know. And it's always interesting when we go back into the annals of history and look at what happened and read, and you think, oh, I didn't know that. And perhaps we need to do better on that score. And this is what SABC is embarking on. Of course, you know, reminding us of who we are as a nation, how we got to this point. And yes, we have many issues to tackle at this point, but we should never forget that where we are, the rights that we have, the civil liberties that we enjoy, were hard fought for, and they were often paid for in blood. And that we should never forget. So thanks so much for being with us here on Morning Live. Dr. Tian Elov, Judge Bernard Ngwepe, Cheryl Carolus, and Jackie Soroke are our guests this morning. And we stopped at CODESA. We're now at CODESA. You know, moving on from where we started, we're at CODESA. Ms. Carolus, you wanted to come in at that point.
No, I was just going to say that at the end, if we think about it, it's quite remarkable, because with CODESA 1 and the whole CODESA process, everybody had the same and equal vote in that room. And we somehow managed to produce a constitution that, you know, at the risk of sounding immodest, I would say is the best constitution in the world today. It's written in simple language. Thank you, Justice Ngwepe. It is robust, and in many ways, it has been what has saved us against some of the wrongdoing in our country, or the liberation of some of those rights in it. But that 14 parties could sit down, nobody had more votes than the other one, and we found that constitution that enshrined our hopes and our aspirations, and a framework for how we would conduct this very polarized country that was at war with itself, how we would move forward. And I think it's quite a remarkable achievement that we also mustn't forget, that 14 parties, each one with one vote, not saying, I represent 90%, I represent 40%. But we were able to find, with all these disparate views and conflicting things, what was it that was the vision and the dream that we all shared for the future.
And speaking of that vision and that dream that we share as South Africans, it's not a static one.
No.
And, you know, we look at many people today talking about our constitution and the need for amendment to that constitution. And I want to talk about that, because people feel that there are certain things that are in the Constitution. Someone actually said this week, someone sent a voice note where they were saying that, you know, if this Constitution of ours is so wonderful, why then are we going through all the things that we are going through, one? And two, why has nobody copied this wonderful constitution of ours? That was what the voice note said. So how would you respond to that, Mr. Soroke?
I think we should, with reflection and with hindsight, also make critical reflections on the CODESA process itself and on the constitution of the country. Whilst it's lauded by many people as a wonderful constitution, we agree. I mean, there's nothing that safeguards people's interest like to give them all the basic freedoms to talk, because we came from an era when voices were suppressed, when people were killed and jailed, and there was internecine violence around that time when these talks were taking place. However, the greatest issue with the CODESA process for me was that some of the decision-making processes were flawed. Look, you had 14 organizations, most of them government-related, including organizations that represented the Bantustan, the erstwhile Bantustan. And you had liberation movement, about 2 of them in that forum. So the CODESA 1 and 2 process had its own difficulties, which also led to the ANC walking out. Because some of the processes, I mean, the ANC was facing serious difficulties. You remember the violence was too high. But you had organizations like the Inkatha movement being infiltrated and abused by the SADF rogues, they call them, who were igniting fires and killing people while the negotiations were going through. The 2 points I want to raise is that they had a concept called sufficient consensus. That concept meant that even if you raise the right point, it would not be considered because the majority outvote you. In essence, that's what it meant. The second thing is, like all legal documents, people were able to smuggle in poison pills. Poison pills are sections of the law that make it difficult for you to implement those laws. And lawmakers who work like that without balancing issues in such a way that it must be practical for me to have regular water that the Constitution promises me. It must be practical for me to have food that everybody needs. It must be practical for these things to be implemented. All those things were not properly checked. And the poison pill also sabotaged the issue of land. Whilst we have property rights, the property rights defend those who have property without having acquired that property properly. So there's still issues that need to be debated and discussed from that constitution. And these are issues that are apparent and real today.
I see the revolutionary has not left, Jackie. On the sufficient consensus, just to say that the technical definition, because we had to write the minutes, was that enough parties must agree for the process to go on. In practice, when my colleague who wrote the minutes asked Cyril, what exactly is sufficient consensus? He said, if Rolf and I agree, we have sufficient consensus. And I agree, but we also had a time frame. There was violence. We knew that we had to get to an election as soon as possible. So we had to have deadlock breaking mechanisms. And the first CODESA didn't have it. By the way, there's no such thing as CODESA 2. The name CODESA was a hugely political thing. We took 2 days to discuss it. And then we decided we'll have a generic name. We'll just call it the multi-party negotiating process. So that's CODESA 2. And that one worked better, but the time frame was short. So I agree with Jackie that not everything could be addressed. People often say to me, you were there, why didn't you give us a proper economic system? I said, we didn't have time, and it's not the place in a constitution to describe an economic system. That's a policy issue that the government, but those second, what they call second degree socioeconomic rights, food and so on, I think they have been there in principle, but they have to be rolled out by government, and that unfortunately didn't happen.
Sakina, I do want to say, however, the problem is not the Constitution. The problem is the political will to implement. Sure. I would argue very strongly, Comrade Jackie, that the provisions around land rights, for example, and the young man who was an articled clerk here at the Constitution Court, well, I suppose he's also not so young anymore, Tembeka Nkaitoibe, advocate also, asserts very strongly, and I agree with him. The land clauses as they stand in the Constitution, there is absolutely nothing wrong with it. It's the political will of the elected leaders to actually implement it. A constitution cannot give you mechanisms for how you provide food. Our constitution is unique because it's the only one in the whole world that actually has socio-economic rights enshrined within it. And we have found that sections of that has been enforced and the jurisprudence has evolved as a consequence. You think, for example, the access to antiretrovirals. At the time, the political leadership were actually opposing antiretrovirals, life-saving medical thing. It was through civil society that people today have access. The high number of people with AIDS in South Africa living with AIDS is because in South Africa, because of access to antiretrovirals, People don't die of AIDS. People live with HIV. And the political leaders, if they had their way, it wouldn't have happened. But because of our constitution, I was part of the movement that mobilized and we won the right. You think of the Grootboom case, which was the watershed case around people's assertion to rights. Beautifully balanced thing to say, obviously, everybody is homeless today, is not going to have a home tomorrow. But the Constitution compelled government and prescribed the Constitutional Court through the Constitution, said you have to demonstrate what is the journey in the case of this. And Mrs. Grootboom asserted that right. And it's how the law and will evolve and how we will enforce government to come up with policies that speaks to the needs of people. And we see the Constitutional Court on a daily basis say to the elected leaders in Parliament, you are falling short. This policy of yours doesn't measure up, but it also doesn't make the law. The Constitution can't be the law and the Constitutional Court can't. So they instruct Parliament to say, do your job. You are not measuring up. But the Constitution is a framework. It's not used enough. And the point you made, education and active citizenry. We need to get back on our bicycles, and Comrade Jackie and I were just saying earlier, we can't sit and relax here. We have to force these elected leaders of ours to get off their bums and do what the Constitution tells them to do.
Judge Mwepe?
I think I must come in on this issue of the Constitution, the goodness or otherwise of it. As the people who were helping with the drafting of the interim Constitution, from which the subsequent final Constitution largely borrowed, we always had the back of our mind that there are certain things which must be built into the Constitution to make sure that we have a stable country and a stable government that would run the country effectively in accordance with the law. Because remember, we knew that what we're doing was to come up with a dispensation in which it will be a constitutional state. In other words, where the Constitution was going to be the supreme law. We knew that, and we were working towards that. And as we're doing so, we're making sure to make sure that there were certain things which had to be put into the Constitution for it to be able to enable the nation to achieve its hopes and expectations. And a good Constitution is the one which has got those built-in mechanisms which will, for example, prevent the government from abusing its powers, Parliament, and so on and so forth. So we do have, in that sense, our Constitution that we subsequently had is a good one. But in going into practice, a different thing altogether. And that's where the problem comes. You may put up very important institutions into the Constitution, build them into the Constitution of the country. But as I often raise this point, the difficulty is in the implementation and realization of that Constitution. You need to empower those institutions appropriately. You must capacitate them, give them the budget to do that. Let's take, for example, the courts. Let's take us, for example, the Human Rights Commission. No, I'm going back to the court. Let's take, for example, the court. The judiciary is there. It has been strengthened by the Constitution to pronounce on the ultimate law of the land. But the question is, who are you putting in there? What kind of people are you putting in there to enable that important institution to function properly? I give the court as an example, but there are other. You have got Chapter 9 institutions. You can have that. We can have 100 institutions in terms of the Constitution. That will not help you if you don't put the right people to serve in those constitutions. But one of my problems, of course, my concern is the judiciary.
Unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there. But I think this is, of course, the perfect opening to launching Democracy 30 on SABC News, because these are the conversations that you can look forward to, South Africa, going back, reflecting on how we got to the point where we are today. And thank you so much. I said it, we had assembled an absolutely stellar panel here for you this morning. Dr. Tiens Elof, Judge Bernard Ngwepe, Ms. Cheryl Carolus, and of course, Mr. Jackie Eseroke. And thank you so much to all of you for coming through. Democracy 30 launching on Sunday evening at 8:30 p.m. on SABC News 404. You don't want to miss it. And it's going to be worth watching right after Elections 360. But right now, Leanne standing by in studio with your news at 8.
All right. Yes, thanks very much, SK. Let's get into our news at 8 this morning. The alibi of Muzi Sibia, accused number 1 in the Senzo Meyiwa murder trial, has been dealt another blow. This as his bank records show that he was in Gauteng between 2013 and 2015. The state says it has obtained the accounts of accused 1, 2, 4 and 5. The version of accused number 1, Muzi Sibia, is that he was in Nongoma, KwaZulu-Natal between 2013, when he lost his job, and 2015, and could not have been in Gauteng nor involved in the killing of the soccer star on the 26th of October 2014. But a series of bank transactions read out in court show that Sibia made withdrawals at ATMs in Vosloorus on Gauteng's East Rand. This is the second dash to Sibia's alibi. In March, a witness who testified about data from the National Administration Traffic Information System showed that Sibia sat for his learner's license test twice in 2014 in Brakpan and in Boksburg. The 3 men accused of theft of foreign currency at President Cyril Ramaphosa's Phala farm are this morning expected to appear in the Bela Bela Magistrates Court in Limpopo. The 3 face charges of housebreaking, theft and conspiracy to steal. They allegedly stole $580,000 at the president's farm in February 2020. The NPA earlier told the court that 2 additional arrests were imminent. This as they had applied for the extradition of 2 Namibian nationals in connection with a case. 2 of the accused, siblings Floriana and Ndilinasho Joseph, have been released on bail. Alleged mastermind Emanuela David has been denied bail. The matter is expected to be referred for trial soon. The Constitutional Court has issued directions which have extended the deadline for respondents to file answering affidavits should they wish to oppose the IEC's bid to appeal the Electoral Court order, which paved the way for former President Jacob Zuma to remain on the Umkhonto we Sizwe party's candidate list. This comes after lawyers on behalf of the first and second respondents, Umkhonto we Sizwe party and former President Jacob Zuma, wrote to the Apex Court to seek an extension. The court has now given respondents until Tuesday, the 30th of April 2024 to file. In the letter requesting an extension dated 24 April 2024, the MK party and Zuma's lawyer stated that the time afforded to the respondents was unreasonably short and that it would be impossible to furnish a meaningful answering affidavit within 24 hours. The original deadline set by the Constitutional Court was today. The Electoral Court is yet to provide reasons for its order, which set aside the IEC's March decision that disqualified Zuma's candidacy due to the contempt of court finding against him by the Apex Court and the subsequent sentence of 15 months imprisonment given to Zuma in 2021. The IEC, which is standing by its March decision, filed papers in the Constitutional Court earlier this month asking for an urgent hearing. The Commission contends that it's in the public interest and the interests of justice for there to be finality and clarity on Section 47.1E of the Constitution before any votes are cast to avoid the election and its outcome being tainted if its appeal succeeds. Former President Thabo Mbeki has hit the campaign trail calling on South Africans to vote for the ANC. Soweto was abuzz yesterday with many wanting to see and engage with the former South African ANC president. Mbeki says this is the start, of his campaign work for the ANC to help win the elections.
That's why I'm saying I want to make a commitment as we campaign and say to the people, vote ANC.
Soweto was gripped by excitement as former ANC President Thabo Mbeki took the ANC campaign to the people for the first time since leaving public office. Residents of the biggest township in the country wanted to see the prodigal son of the liberation movement. A son who for over a decade wouldn't don regalia or say vote ANC. He says it feels good to be back campaigning. Mr. President, how does it feel to be out and about?
It's very good, Chief. Very good to see you.
The former ANC leader says on the 29th of May, the people of South Africa should vote for the governing party because it's on a path of renewal.
I came to Jaulani Mall to distribute this leaflet, to ask the people of Soweto to vote for the ANC at the end of April, 29th, of May. As you can see, I think the response is very good. I have not been in Soweto for some time, but I know the response of the people. Have campaigned here before and will come here again because I think it is important that we should indeed return the ANC to power.
Mbeki admits that the nation is faced with a lot of problems, but says they are being addressed, despite some internal issues in the party.
I know there are many problems in the country, even problems within the ANC. And so as we say vote ANC, we're also making a commitment to the people that we will attend to the problems within the ANC itself to make sure that it is able to discharge its responsibilities to the population. But I think fortunately, my knowledge of the people of Soweto is that they will listen to that, and I hope they will. Because it's a challenge to address all of these problems, unemployment, poverty, crime, everything. And I think the ANC can do it, but it's an ANC that must be transformed. So I make that kind of commitment to these voters that will also attend to the ANC itself so that it can deliver on its promises.
Mbeki committed to return and campaign in Soweto as well as other areas in the country in order for the ANC to win the upcoming elections. Samkele Masego, SABC News, Soweto.
Well, it's not a story you hear very often, but Tanzania is cutting back on its sources of electricity as the power grid is being overloaded. Tanzania's government is temporarily shutting down 5 hydroelectric facilities in a bid to manage an electricity overflow, thanks mainly to the success of a new hydroelectric megastation.
For the first time in its history, Tanzania finds itself in an unusual position of having to reduce electricity production to balance the grid, according to the country's prime minister. It's because of the success of the recently opened Julius Nyerere hydropower project, which has led to an electricity overflow, attracting praise from Tanzania's top politician for the state electricity company for producing reliable supplies.
Uzalishaji wa umeme.
Electricity generation has exceeded the electrical needs. Let's have a round of applause to congratulate ourselves. This is a step we have been waiting for a long time, and our fellow Tanzanians will be encouraged by this news.
The Prime Minister emphasized the importance of finding innovative ways to utilize the Julius Nyerere hydroelectric station dam's water resources to benefit nearby communities. Tanzania is blessed with an array of untapped energy resources, including biomass, natural gas, hydro, coal, geothermal, solar, wind, and even uranium, positioning the country for a sustainable energy future. However, the country has faced challenges raising the capital to exploit its renewable energy resources. Daniel Kijo, SABC, Dar es Salaam, Tanzania.
Right, that's it. That's where we'll leave your news at 8 and check in on the traffic at the same time. So let's do that. Erin's standing by. Erin, over to you.
Thank you so much, Leanne. Well, things have certainly gotten busier across the country in terms of morning traveling, starting in KwaZulu-Natal, where traffic is heavy on the M7 West in Pinetown. As you can see, volumes are hectic, so definitely delays out there. Moving to Gauteng now. We're on the N4 highway in Pretoria. A taxi accident at the Mabopane Highway has traffic bumper to bumper there. It looks like things are moving, but at a snail's pace. So note that if you need to make use of that N4 highway this morning. Staying in Gauteng, where congestion on the N1 North before Winnie Mandela Drive is packed. The front of the queue cannot even be seen on screen. There are delays of more than 10 minutes reported. In fact, there, the official satellite map showing that 15-minute delay. So factor that into your commute this morning. And in the Western Cape, things on the N2 outbound at the Victoria Street junction has been queuing for quite some time now. So yes, definitely delays expected there as well. But in a broader look at Cape Town, lots of congestion across the metropole. The M3 Newlands backed up towards Hospital Bend. Also slow moving traffic approaching Spine Road in Khayelitsha on that N2. Out in Rondebosch in the northbound direction, traffic is heavy traveling towards the N2 highway exit. I'm also seeing congestion on the R300 in Mitchell's Plain at the Stock Road exit. Jan Smuts in Epping also heavily backed up, while motorists are advised just to travel cautiously on the N1 inbound. There's an accident before the Monte Vista exit. All the lanes are open, but please just be vigilant approaching the scene. Well, that's how we wrap up your commuter news here on Morning Live. Please commute safely. Remember to wear your seatbelt when traveling, making sure your little ones also have a seatbelt on, and be patient and aware as you travel on the country's roads this weekend. We'll leave it at that. Joel Guy is standing by with a last look at your weather for the show.
Welcome back. It is going to be a cloudy and rainy day across much of KwaZulu-Natal with cool afternoon temperatures. But we are starting off the day with just a few specks of cloud over the northern parts of the province. And we have this picture to prove that, sent in by Sipiwe from Hambanati. Just a bit of cloud overhead, nice golden hues there of the sun just coming up over the horizon. But further south in Amanzimtoti, we have quite a lot of rain-bearing clouds. It is already starting to rain over these parts of KwaZulu-Natal. And Tyson didn't tell us where he is in KwaZulu-Natal, but also cloudy wherever he is. And we also have more or less similar cloudy conditions around Hamashamba village in Limpopo. This is close to Makado, sent in earlier on. So it is going to be partly cloudy to cloudy for much of eastern South Africa, including much of KwaZulu-Natal, where up to a 60% chance of rain and thunderstorms is forecast to fairly wet as well for much of the Eastern Cape, with those widespread rain showers along the south coast. But the chance of rain decreases as we go towards the southern areas of the Western Cape, and also further north into much of Mpumalanga, parts of Limpopo, and also for Gauteng. The Free State will get away with partly cloudy skies, so will the northwest, and it will be mostly sunny across much of the northern Cape. Fresh to strong winds for the southwestern areas. Cape Town will get winds reaching speeds of 50 kilometers per hour. Wind as well for the south and the east coast, where winds will get to speeds of between 30 and 40 kilometers per hour. Now for the northern Cape, we have that warning for high fire danger conditions. Be careful around open fires where you see that shade of red. Gauteng is going to be partly cloudy with isolated thunder showers early in the evening, and temperatures will make it into the mid-20s for much of the province. It will stay pretty warm for much of Limpopo. Temperatures mostly in the upper 20s and lower 30s. Thunder showers are also forecast for much of the province. Bakersford will warm to a pleasant 25 degrees. It gets cooler as we go towards the Mpumalanga province. Partly cloudy to cloudy with rain and thunder showers for a good part of your day. And temperatures here will be mostly in the mid-20s this afternoon. We are expecting a cool one for the interior of KwaZulu-Natal. It will be mostly cloudy for the province with scattered rain and thunderstorms in places. Pretty wet as well for much of the Eastern Cape. Temperatures in the upper teens and lower 20s. Gqeberha managing a high of 21, a similar high for East London. Cooler in Makanda, peaking at just around 19 degrees. It is also going to stay cool for the southern areas of the Western Cape. Fairly wet weather along the Garden Route and also over the Overberg area. Cape Town will be partly cloudy and dry, warming to around 23 degrees. Sunny skies are forecast for the Northern Cape. Sutherland staying cool, warm for much of the province, but rather hot for Upington, peaking at around 34 degrees. Just a bit of cloud for the eastern parts of the Free State, Bloemfontein. Clear blue skies overhead, warming to 27. A similar high is forecast for Sasolburg. It is going to be partly cloudy across the northwest with temperatures in the upper 20s for most areas, but sizzling hot for Tosca at 33 degrees. The weather becomes pretty unsettled over the weekend. Saturday, seeing isolated to scattered thunderstorms for much of the country. That's all from the weather desk.
Right, welcome back everybody. So as we turn our attention to the role played by civil society, which has been at the centre of South Africa's struggle, Oliver is about to have a conversation with some of the role players who have been a constant feature in the struggle for a better life in South Africa. So let me hand it over to you, Oliver.
Leanne, thank you so much. Really do appreciate it. We're still coming to you live from the Constitutional Hill for the special broadcast. The launch of Democracy 30. I'm excited to be here because the women's jail where we're broadcasting from right now is a place that housed many of the activists that fought against the evil apartheid regime. And many of them became social activists that joined civil society later on that played a role in shaping South Africa's very, very young democracy. Hassan Logart, who's a social justice activist as well as an economic justice activist, joins me, as well as Lisa Vetten, who is a gender-based violence activist as well as an academic. Morning. Thank you so much for joining me. Really, really do appreciate it. Hassan, I perhaps want to start with you and ask this. Sketch the context for us within which social justice activists existed and the role they played in the lead up to our democracy in those last few years before apartheid officially fell over, right? Because that becomes an important springboard for what it looks like once democracy takes shape.
Oliver, you're right to start it historically. I noticed in some of the manifestos of political parties, they don't have history. They just start and talk about potholes and stuff like that, as if this is what we fought for. Of course, we fought for a better life. But the years before the turn of the democracy, before '94, I would say we were so united, across so-called racial lines. We united because we had a common enemy, racial capitalism. We were so informed about the sub-region, and the trade union movement that I belonged to, right, was such a unifying force. In fact, I remember going to a meeting, anti-apartheid meeting, where Bishop Tutu spoke, and he made a joke about how the unions have inspired our politics. In fact, he said, "Have you got a mandate?" in Tutu's own voice, because democracy for us then meant mandates and report backs. Unfortunately, coming into the new South Africa, as we still call it, because it's a 30-year-old, still a youth in terms of ANC, but there's been a decline of accountable leadership. We have great policies.
And social justice activists and activists in civil society, by and large, plays a very important safeguarding role, a very important accountability role.
We play some check, but there's been a decline as well. So when I raised the issue of the trade union movement being the unifying force, COSATU was there. Now we've got SAFTU, we've got COSATU, we've got unions like GUSA, but we don't have that same gravitas to keep power to account. We seem to, everyone is doing everything, but that impact that we had to make sure that our world on society will reflect that of the poorest people in society, that is gone.
Yeah.
It is not there as strong as it was. There's some moments of it. For example, the scourge of rape, which Lisa will talk about, and I'm so glad she's here. Every time you look at the stats, it looks like you get figures of 10,000 people raped in a 3-month period. I mean, we have not even begun to dent that. The unions don't think it's their struggle. It's all our struggle. Because if the weakest members of our society sleep without food, sleep in homes that are with burglar bars and unsafe, and people, women in particular, cannot walk down the street without being harassed or raped, something is wrong with our democracy.
Lisa, I want you to pick up from there. Why have we been unable to divorce ourselves from the violent history that we come from? Because that seemed to have carried over with ease and a great level of effort into what became life in democracy.
I think, Oliver, part of the problem is that we don't look at history as a learning tool, and we don't look at it carefully. So, for instance, if we want to look at rape historically, then the high point of violence against women in South Africa was the 1990s. If we look at the number of women who were murdered and the number of women who were raped, that decade was exceptionally violent. We then saw an improvement, a kind of stabilization that continued until about 2012, 2015. Things have shifted, and so in the last 5 years, we've seen violence towards women increasing. It's not the levels that they were in the 1990s, but there is a definite shift. So it's telling us we need to break up these periods and understand what changed here, what changed then. What is it that is both continuous in keeping violence in place, but what is it?
What does the research tell us? What does the literature tell us? What has been continuous?
Well, I think what has been continuous, I think, has been these embedded attitudes of women belong to me. They're my sense of entitlement and a sense of resentment. This is a new South Africa, and the new South Africa has benefited women. It hasn't benefited me. I also think what's also continuous is very weak institutions. So we've had problems with the police before '94. We continue to have problems with the police. For me, it's immensely depressing, 30 years later, to still have to hear complaints that the police chased me away from the station when I went to report and asked me what I was wearing. When women go and want protection from their abusive partners, to be told, Yes, but shouldn't you go home and try and be nice towards him? Do you really want to put him in prison? What about your children? So that's continuous, and I think our efforts to try and change those deeply seated attitudes have not been particularly successful. And what we don't seem to, and what seems to have gotten worse, is there was a period when our institutions were strengthening. They have now, in the last 5-6 years, really eroded.
Yeah.
So it's one thing to
stand
stand
I pause
up
you there and
and-
let's focus on one? And you mentioned
Yeah.
the police. Hassan, we transitioned from a police force to a police service. Lisa said there hasn't really been an operational and attitudinal change that came with that. Why is that? Trade unions play a big role in shaping the civil service, of which the police forms a big part. What did we not get right, not as a government, but as a people altogether, around changing our attitudes about an institution as important as the police?
I mean, I think sometimes, of course, it's a formal level. We've got 2 trade unions, right, POPCRU and SAPU, which theoretically are sympathetic to the cause of the downtrodden. But in practice, the system is still a force, And I always think when you're further away from the metropole where the democracy and the constitution works, there, the person in the uniform is in power. So I think we have not made a dent in fighting the power of men in uniform. Patriarchy is so powerful. Patriarchy in the church, the mosques, all over. So the power of men is so prevailing, and we are not doing enough to challenge it. But we cannot challenge it without strong movements. So as I said, we lament the fact that we're not as strong as we were. But similarly, women's movements and others were stronger, relatively speaking, to now.
Lisa, is patriarchy innate to democracy, or is there an opportunity for us? And are we doing the work to separate and really, break away patriarchy from what becomes our democratic DNA?
No, patriarchy is not innate to democracy, and I think that's again why we should look at history, because things do not stay the same always. They change, and it's important to look at when have they changed? When do we have those historical moments we can learn from and think about now? So I think there have been achievements that we should not overlook. For instance, before 1994, there was one woman in government, in the cabinet. Yeah. That has shifted. In 1993, up until then, you could rape your wife and that was just fine. Right. You would not go to jail for that. That has changed. We also have laws that say you actually can't hit your wife or your girlfriend or your children. That's wrong. Those did not exist previously. So I think we have to look at what has been accomplished and then get to these questions of, well, what has not been able to shift? And I think that's to make the realization that law is important, but it's not enough. And so it's a concern that here we are.
So how do we move from theoretical justice to substantive justice?
I think what we have to realize is that a law is a piece of paper. You have to make it work. You have to consistently extract promises from it. The fact that it's there doesn't mean anything. And that, I think, is Hassan's point about we need to have strong movements. And the fact that things have fragmented in the last decade or so, I think there's sometimes an assumption that, well, we have all these things on paper, what else do we need? The fact that we've fragmented, that we've lost these ideas of how you continue to hold the state to account is a problem. Parliament has also become weak, so it's very hard to also get Parliament to extract promises from government and to hold them to account. So I think we're in quite a new space. That's not what it was 10 years ago, and we haven't come up with the strategies to deal with these new spaces and what they mean for the way we work now.
Hassan, just 30 seconds, because I do have to go to an ad break here. It's not a perfect democracy. It's a democracy in work. It's a young democracy, but certainly a democracy worth celebrating. I think you and I can agree on that.
Well, I won't get arrested for sitting outside an area which was regarded as white, or ask permission to go to a cinema, or, So clearly, the indignities of apartheid, counts for something. But taking the long road, our lament is not that there's no progress, is that the progress has not been fast and inclusive.
Thank you so much, Hassan. Really appreciate it. Lisa, thank you so much for that. Really appreciate it. Look, we still have a lot more coming up for you. Social justice and social activists played a big role in shaping our democracy and fighting for our freedom. But so too did artists. On the other side of this, Sakina's going to be in conversation with Professor Pitikantuli as well as PJ Powers. And if you stick around till the end, PJ Powers is going to treat us to a lovely performance. And they're going to be talking about the role that artists played in shaping the message to the rest of the international community about the South African story and how that helped fight for our freedom as well as build our democracy. All of that on the other side of this. Don't go away. Stay with us.
Right, welcome back. Hope you're enjoying the broadcast this morning as we reflect over 30 years of democracy. And that was the question that we asked you, the viewer, this morning, is to weigh in on this conversation and also just talk to us about your views on these last 30 years. So let's put them up once again. Here are your X's at Morning Live SABC. Sechaba, we have free education, social grants, free healthcare, electricity and freedom in general, even though some service delivery are lacking, but we are free. Sid Will, democracy since 1994 was the enabler for the marginalized majority to have a say in the affairs of our country by having a vote, because during apartheid things were done for us without our input. We are free to go where we like, but jobs have been lost by thousands. Ms. Kay saying, I think the pertinent issue of landless people is yet to be addressed by the 30 years of democracy of the Constitution. The struggle against colonialism and apartheid was waged against dispossession of the land. Many citizens still don't own land for housing. Sbu, I have enjoyed the benefits of democracy. However, it hasn't been as easy as we had hoped it will. I have worked hard and fought to get to enjoy. It is sad that the organization that fought for our democracy appears to be the one that is now oppressing our people. And this is from Mutwanamba saying, morning team, still no water, especially in rural areas. We buy water every day, no proper streets, high numbers of crime rate. There is a lot. It's just a 30-year democracy for nothing. This is from Siambe village outside Tohoyando in Limpopo. All right, so more of your views and comments here on Morning Live. Hopefully we'll have a chance to read a few more for you. But right now, let's quickly take a break. Right, back to that question of the day, but this time we want to play some of your WhatsApp messages and actually listen to your voice with regards to your opinion on the last 30 years of democracy. All right, but we'll put that on pause for the moment. We just want to get this to you quickly. Civil society activism has played an integral part in our society. They often become the voice of the voiceless against powerful public and private interests. So to kickstart our next discussion, let's take a look at this insert for context.
As the curtain fell on the repressive apartheid regime, many social movements decreased.
We are going to be free.
The excitement of democracy took hold, and many anti-apartheid leaders joined the transitional government. To many of them, the state was no longer the enemy, and the new South Africa had to be given space to work. But cracks started showing in 1996 when Labour Federation COSATU mobilized about 4 million protesters against the state's macroeconomic policy gear, which they said was neoliberal and anti-poor. Around the same time, the AIDS pandemic caused devastation in families amidst the state's refusal to provide medication. The Treatment Action Campaign mobilized far and wide and dragged the state to court until it was forced to change its stance.
What we are going to do is we're going to take this promise of the Constitution, which says everyone has a right of access to healthcare services, and we are going to campaign.
As the socio-economic realities of living in the new South Africa deepened, more social movements cropped up with communities across the country demanding land, water, education, and other services from the state.
Once it began to become clear that this government wasn't going to deliver on those promises, then people needed to start to organize.
The 2011 killing of Andre Statani and the 2012 killing of the Marikana mine workers by the police became some of the defining moments in the relationship between the state and civil society. In 2015, higher education campuses across the country erupted with students calling for free education. The state responded by deploying police. Some social justice activists make the ultimate sacrifice. Informal settlements movement Abahlali baseMjondolo says to date, some of their activists have lost their lives.
But more, what we have seen in our movement has been the brutal evictions. At some point, at gunpoint, we have been targeted.
While lack of funding threatens some NGOs, some say with the unabating gender-based violence and hate crimes, more revelations of state and private sector corruption, and the deepening socio-economic crisis, the voice of the civil society must be louder. From the farm dwellers demanding access to land, to mining communities pushing back against the obliteration of their communities, to young people demanding to be heard, it seems that sides of the struggle are varied and likely to increase if the past 30 years are anything to go by. Tshego Fatso Magolego, SABC News, Johannesburg.
All right, so arts and culture also under the spotlight. Let's hand it back to SK.
Welcome to Constitution Hill, and what a morning it has been. I mean, listening to both panels, the one that I chaired and the one that was headed by Oliver, absolutely fascinating what's happening in the space of activism and active citizenry in this country, but also just taking a stroll down memory lane with those who were there before and, of course, after the dawn of democracy. And right now, we're going to venture into the arts. And as you can see, two people who need absolutely no introduction, but we'll do it as due diligence. And I'm joined, of course, by our very own Tandega, PJ Powers, and Professor Pitika Ntuli. Thanks so much to both of you for coming through. And we are, of course, on the eve of the democracy breakthrough on the 27th of April 1994, and we are now 30 years on. Let's reflect a little in terms of the arts, what was going on and how far we've come. Prof, perhaps I could start with you.
When we started with the RDP, Reconstruction and Development, with a very clear program, we introduced ACTEC, the Arts and Culture Task Team. And the Arts and Culture Task Team was to delineate where the arts are going to be, arts in schools, arts in higher education, arts in creative cities. But then again, always as usual, in our country we suffer from a very serious disease called continuous discontinuity. We start very brilliant things, then we put them and we throw them away. We come up with a national curriculum statement for further education, a brilliant document that could have Africanized our children, and then we drop it. So we can just go on and on. But it does look like there are some new changes that are coming, which maybe we are going to pick up in terms of the creative industries and culture.
PJ, from your side, you know, just looking back, the performing arts, and I'm reminded of the days when the stadia would be filled to capacity, when we're talking 100,000 strong crowds that would cram into a stadium, be it for a football match, a festival, or a combination of the two. I mean, you know, you were there. Talk to us about that and how the transition subsequently has gone.
I was there. And whilst politically we were a disaster in those days, I must be honest that from an artist's point of view, it was nirvana. You know, every single weekend we would go to Jabulani Amphitheatre or Jabavu or anywhere in the country, and as you say, perform to this incredible crowd. And of course, me being embraced by the black people in this country way back in 1983 was my biggest gift that I've ever received, and still remains the biggest gift. So those days, and they're kind of dangerous. There was problems getting into the festivals. The SAP was always there in a Casper or in a, ready to start any number of problems. And then come 1994, and our glorious democracy, at the dawning of that. And it was, obviously we were very very happy. I never voted until I could vote. And so we could all vote. And then it kept up, the momentum kept up. I think that what Prof says about brilliant discontinuity is there's great merit in that statement, because then what happened was, what also came down was the ban, the cultural boycott, then also came down. And we started these floods of international artists came into this country, and suddenly we weren't seen, there was no talk of us. And whilst I understand the task at hand was enormous, for the government in terms of taking on an entire country, I think that the time has come. We really have to now put structures in place that protect the arts in many, many ways. One of them being international people here have got to use our crew. They've got to use local. You can't go and do a show anywhere in the world and take your own crew. You can't go and do a show anywhere. The artists and musicians, I'm talking from a music, are protected, and we need to put those structures in place now.
Right. You know what? We obviously need to speak a little bit more. And what we're doing this morning, one of the things that we are doing, of course, is that we are launching Democracy 30, yes, which is going to be a program that launches on Sunday evening at 8:30 with Oliver Dixon. And all of these discussions will be had with all of you, those who were there, because this was, of course, a turning point, but there were aspirations, as both of you have pointed out at that point. But how well have we done in terms of realizing those aspirations? You know, what have been the successes post-democracy? What have been some of the failures that we have seen? And perhaps we can speak to, you know, some of those successes, which both of you have touched on, and the failures. But in looking forward for South Africa for the next 30 years and beyond, where do you think we can do better, Prof?
I think one of the first things is that government should increase the budget, you know, for the arts. When you talk about cultural boycott, you realize the role that the artists themselves have played. But on some of the positive things is that the introduction of the Fantuka, you know, legends in a program, you know, by the former Minister Nati Mthethwa, was a very good, you know, starting point. And then we also noticed that the National Heritage Council is also giving some awards or encouraging, you know, people. But ultimately, the latest one, the cultural and creative industries things that Minister Zizi Kodwa is you know, putting in is quite a very brilliant idea. But always in our country, what happens is that the people on top may be very brilliant, but the people that have been put down on the side there, that had been deployed actually in the murder and maim and drink the beer of the success of others.
All right, good point on which to park it as we go to a break. And of course, there will be a performance, and we're going to come back with that because it's been a minute, but we are going to make sure that we play this out in befitting style. But let's take a quick break.
I've been promising you voice notes for a while now. Let's listen to them.
Dalian. It's Nicholas Makrina from Robertson. I'm currently in my late 30s. I think we've moved very far as a country. We're really in a better place today. I know we're not where we're supposed to be, but I feel South Africa democracy has worked well for us. I think our children will have a better future. All we need to do as a country is to be stronger together, but I think we can achieve more if you want to. Thank you.
Morning, beautiful ladies. Yes, 30 years of democracy and freedom. But we did not know that freedom and democracy is the type of life that we are living now. We should have been went to vote for National Party if we knew that we are heading to a mess up and disaster of this country. Thank you. It's Mystic Man in Sulamahar.
Yeah, morning.
All right, that's where I say goodbye. Hand it back to Constitutional Hill. Have a beautiful Freedom Day weekend, everyone. Bye-bye.
And thanks so much, Leanne. And yes, we did promise you that performance by PJ Powers. He's standing by. So without much further ado, I'm going to step out so we can get the weekend rolling.
All right, let's do this thing.
Love each other more than before. With each new day we have a chance to share this land we love with one and with all. There is a road to harmony. Together you and me will all live peacefully. Together we can build this nation again. There is an answer and we'll find a way. Together we can build this nation again. Though the road seems long and dark, there is a light of hope that shines on us. Together now we must be brave.
remember this song, Oliver?
I don't.
Oh, we need.
May have been number 2, yeah.
That's where we're going to leave it. Goodbye from us, PJ Powers, and of
Thank
course,
you very much,
Democracy
Sakina.
30 on Sunday evening.
Tune in Sunday,
Happy Freedom
8:30
Day, South
p.m.
Africa.
Coming to you live from the SABC studios. Cheers, everybody.
There is an